Good afternoon, everyone. This session is called From Endangered to Enduring, 7 to Save Stories. And my name is Maggie Steer with the Preservation Alliance, and I am pleased to say that the Preservation Alliance's 7 to Save program was one of the first things I worked on when I was hired in 2006, so it's almost 20 years old. This session will bring together past 7 to Save listees who will share 7 lessons they've learned while transforming endangered properties into preservation successes, stories, or nearly there success stories. From building partnerships to securing funding, this program can help your project move from at-risk to saved. And you'll also learn a little bit more about what it means to be listed as a 7 to Save. The Preservation Alliance launched this program in 2006, and since then, listees have used this designation to attract attention and resources. Over 125 irreplaceable landmarks and property types have made the list. Criteria for selection include historic significance, the imminence of the threat to the building, and the potential impact of listing a site. This is a program that typically focuses on nonprofit-owned, publicly owned, religiously owned properties. Sometimes we have listed private properties, but it's a little bit harder to use that as a way to help attract resources because in this state, mostly the property owners are responsible for taking care of their own buildings. Many places on the list are in the process of rehabilitation, while others continue to seek new uses, new owners, and more funding. We like to tell people that about 50% of our 7 to Save list has been saved, and a few have been lost. We'll present 5 case studies today of 7 to Saves at various stages of preservation, and then highlight 7 keys to success. Our panelists, our first panelist will be Scott Halverson of Friends of Big Nansen Ski Jump in Berlin, and he's going to tell us about his project in about 5 minutes. Scott?
Go out there?
Sure, you can.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Scott Halverson, and I am the treasurer of the Nansen Ski Club and a member of the Friends of Big Nansen. Now, some of you might not know, what is Big Nansen? Well, Big Nansen was a ski jump built in 1938. At the time, it was the world's tallest. In 1938, it held the very first U.S. Winter Olympic trials. It held 4 national championships, numerous North American championships, numerous international invitationals. Everybody who was a good ski jumper jumped at the Big Nansen. That came to close in 1985. The last competition was held there. It is a state of New Hampshire property. Actually, the Nansen Ski Club owned it for a time, but they realized they couldn't keep it up. They sold it to the state of New Hampshire. The state of New Hampshire didn't do much with it for the years, and it got abandoned. It got all grown in until Ben Wilson, who was in this crowd here, became the Director of Bureau of Historic Sites. He had a passion for it. A friends group formed in Berlin, New Hampshire, and collaborated with Ben to just try to get it cleaned up and everything else. And a lot of other things happened to the point that the mission, which was first just historic preservation, has evolved into restoring the jump to be used again. Surprise, surprise, we've hit some roadblocks, but we've also done done very well. In the meantime, the whole program has expanded to not just bring back a structure, or as Andrew Cushing has called it, a lawn ornament, but to actually start a vital program to involve the community. And we have built a smaller half-size jump right next to it, held premier competitions there the last 4 years, and we've restarted our youth ski jumping program. So that'll be part of my little thing on how to adapt. But that's it for the Nansen ski jump, and I want to thank the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance for allowing me to be here. Thank you.
So as I said, we'll hear from Scott again. Andrew Cushing, Mascoma Valley Preservation, and the Grafton Meeting House. And you can speak from there, or you can come up.
Okay. The big Nansen just makes my palms sweat even looking at it. I think I was there, was it now, like 3 or 4 years ago? And you're like, let's go all the way to the top. And I said, no, let's stay down here. So my preservation group is regional, Canaan, Enfield, Grafton, Dorchester, and Orange, kind of the Upper Valley region. And we have 2 7 to Save properties that were both actually listed in 2017, so that was convenient for geography. The one on the left is the Canaan Freight Shed, which is town-owned. It was kind of in the middle of this tax dispute, and we've been working with the town. I know, it's like the classic New Hampshire story of property tax disputes. So we've been working with the town of Canaan for several years now to clean up the building. We used Moose Plate grants to get it watertight, so we repaired the slate roof, we replaced the sills, and we had a lot of chainsaw days to get rid of all the overgrowth. We went there and thought, well, it's just brush. So we brought brush clippers the first time, and they were like, oh, this is actually like firewood. And then a bigger project just down the road from Canaan is the Grafton Center Meeting House. And if anyone was in my previous session, it's a 1797 meeting house that had become solely church property in the 1960s, and then was sold to the private market in 2010, and it was painted purple, and they used it kind of as this billboard for a lot of political expressions, and they refused to pay their property taxes as a statement of their political and religious leanings, and the town was poised to take it for back taxes. It burned down the next week, and the man actually died in the fire. So it had a lot of bad feelings surrounding this building, and it sat with a tarp on its roof, or not on its roof, for 3 years as it accumulated snow and water inside. And my group managed to acquire it in 2019, and we're on year 6 of a $7 million project, it feels like, but it's, $1.5 million, and it should be done in a couple months. Knock on wood. So we'll go into more details after, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to introduce Catherine Coco, who is a volunteer for the town of Milford, and her project is the Milford Bandstand.
Hello. So I want to say right up front, I was a member of the Heritage Commission at the time this was raised, and the issue of the bandstand was raised. And while I'm a former member, I've continued working on this project, and I'm here essentially representing the work that whole group did. It was brought to our attention. I think everybody knew there were some issues with the bandstand, but we had a very well-meaning facilities person who had reached out through town administration and asked if the Heritage Commission needed to be involved in any changes that he would make to the structure. So I just want to read to you some of the email that he gave us that sort of triggered our applying for 7 to Save. Could you ask members of the committee for their input? There's a lot of rotten wood throughout the bandstand. I am proposing to tear down the old one, pour a concrete pad to keep out the moisture. It's my understanding, and then he talks about lighting and audio and things that they want to have, and says, I would also recommend using PVC where possible. Thank you for your time. Let me know what your input is. So, as most of you can imagine, that elicited a response from the Heritage Commission. There was outreach on the part of our chair, David Palance, to Jim Garvin, who came back and articulated very clearly for us the importance of the bandstand, its inclusion in an inventory of historic structures that had been downtown, and compared it to the Belmont bandstand, which had recently been restored. So that prompted some action. He is also the one who suggested applying for 7 to Save, and so we did that, and it very immediately raised the profile on the need for this project, and that enabled us to start bringing this to donors and letting them know that we were proposing to do work on it. It also raised the issue with the Board of Selectmen. They became more aware of it, realized something needed to be done, and with the assistance of the Preservation Alliance, we were able to point out, hey, before we do anything, let's get an assessment done. That's going to cost some money. Let's get a small amount of money to do the assessment. We can work with NHPA to do that. So when I speak later, I'll be talking about sort of all the steps we went through and why those took time. But that's essentially what 7 to Save did for us. I can report that, I think that was 2021. It took us until this summer to complete the project. We had what I like to tell everybody was a soft launch on July 19th. We did a formal ribbon cutting ceremony of the newly restored bandstand on Labor Day weekend. And I should also clarify that it is the Pillsbury Bandstand. I'm supposed to be using that name every time. It actually was originally built in 1896 for the Milford Cornet Band. The town had identified the need for that and had had a plan to fundraise, have a clam bake and a baseball game with the city of Nashua. That all got rained out. Mr. Pillsbury read about that. He was the Attorney General in the state of Massachusetts at that time. He wrote to the town of Milford and said, don't worry about it, build the bandstand, I'll write you a check. And so we continue to keep the bandstand in his name to this day. So I think that's it for now, and we'll all talk more about it later.
It was a successful fundraiser.
Yeah. It was a successful fundraiser, and it's still standing, despite, as you can see, the damage in the center of the rim joist there, which we found when we opened it up.
So if anybody knows of Mr. Pillsbury's descendants or others, please speak to us afterwards. James Van Bokelen is Vice President of the Flying Yankee Association, one of the more unusual resources that was listed to 7 to Save. James?
I'm going to stand up so that I can wave my hands. Okay. So, this is not a building. You could argue if you're an engineer, it would be a structure to you, but it's a train. And it's a train that wasn't built in New Hampshire. It was built in Philadelphia. And it was a train that was just about always based in Boston, though they did take it to Concord to fix it for its overhauls and so forth. And it was brought here in hopes that they'd be able to restore it to run over Crawford Notch, but that group lost the bid for the Maine Central Mountain Division in New Hampshire to Conway Scenic, and so it didn't. And it wound up in state hands after that. And there were some donations to preserve it. Well, why preserve it? First, it's shiny stainless steel, and most trains that you see these days, whether they're subway or anything else, are stainless steel. But at this point, stainless steel was patented by the Budd Company of Philadelphia. They just invented shot welding to bond the stainless steel while keeping it rust-free. And it was diesel-powered. And it was the second train of a type where the first one, the Pioneer Zephyr, had just made a 17-hour trip from Denver to Chicago, touching speeds of 117 miles an hour, and without stopping. And if you had been a train passenger in the 20s or the early 30s, stopping was a regular feature because you could not get your standard steam locomotive to run more than about 100 miles without something breaking. They had to take the locomotive off, put another one on, and then the train could go on. So as you can imagine, a trip to Chicago with 10 engine changes was going to be kind of slow. And when they improved the steam locomotives with roller bearing and central lubrication and so forth, well, you might have 5 engine changes, but it was still slow. And 1,000 miles in 17 hours made news all over the world. And so when the B&M ordered one, using a Reconstruction Finance Corporation loan, it was big news, and it toured all over New Hampshire. If you go looking for videos of it, there's one of it passing through the town of Andover, and 50 or 60 people have come down to the tracks in the town of Andover, and the Flying Yankee goes through at 45 miles an hour, because you could do that on the railroad up there at that time. It was a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit. Now it's a rail trail. But very notable, but it was in state hands, and the state never had a budget, so they raised money. But when the money ran out, because the state situation, the contracting laws required them to hire a contractor, when the money ran out, the Flying Yankee was marooned at the contractor site. All of its parts got put away. The people who were working on it either went to other jobs or quit. And the train started deteriorating in the weather outdoors. Because, well, yes, it was a train. It spent 25 years in service outdoors all the time, but it was not made to be outdoors without heat, and it was not made to be months at a time or years at a time without moving, because rain can get in those vents and snow can get in those vents. So about the time, just before we were designated for 7 to Save, we had launched an effort whose first goal was going to be to get it out of state ownership, and whose second goal was to get it into a building so that work that would get done necessarily incrementally when the donations came in, that work would not be undone by an economic downturn like in 2008. Well, no more money, everything got parked. And after the 7 to Save designation, we found that our awareness of what we were trying to do was much higher in state circles and in Concord generally. And 3 years, I think, afterwards, we were able to get the ownership of the Flying Yankee transferred to the Flying Yankee Association. And immediately thereafter, we moved it from where it was to Conway, New Hampshire, over the Kankomegas Pass, and put it on its wheels, which are notably not present here. And so it's on connected railroad track on its wheels, and we have a tough row to hoe to get a building for it built in Conway, but we're making progress on that and other things. I spent last Sunday sorting parts for its diesel prime mover in rented storage up in Concord. And we're having an open house on October 25th. And thanks very much to the Preservation Alliance for giving us this status.
And finally, Leslie Shoemaker and Stephen Weider of the Jackson Historical Society and their project for the Historical Society in the Old Town Hall. We don't need two mics, Leslie.
Okay. I'm, as she said, Leslie Shoemaker, president of the Historical Society, with Ham Hock, if you were here earlier, Stephen Weider, who's our vice president. This is our home, the Jackson Town Hall, and as you see, it's wedged between the river and the road. Just 20 months ago, during a huge rain event, the river came up underneath the building, knocked out our furnace in the middle of December. Also, it's right, literally in the road right-of-way. It was built on a dirt road, so every time the plow comes by, they pile snow against it, and the foundation was a mess. But we don't own the building. It's owned by the town. We've been tenants since 2009. We pay $100 a year rent. And the building needed a lot of renovations, but that wasn't on our agenda. Moving it was not on our agenda. Raising $1 million, over $1 million, was not on our agenda till just 20 months ago. And it's been quite an adventure since. If you see, we were just named 7 to Save last year, and we used that in all of we have a big banner on our building, which is right in the middle of town. We've used it in all of our fundraising appeals or whatever. And I'll come back later on what we've done, but we've had a project that's basically to relocate the building, to move it not far, but we had a lot of obstacles, which you'll hear about later in doing so, and then also to restore and to renovate it. We don't even have indoor plumbing there, and it's kind of time to get a bathroom. So you'll hear about more about that later.
Great, thank you.
What I forgot to say, Stephen didn't come up. He introduced himself in his last talk as a carpenter. He owns a construction company that does high-end houses and a lot of restoration work in old houses. So having him on the board was absolutely critical, because that was a knowledge that nobody else on the board had. So, I was the one in charge of raising the money. Stephen was the one in actually getting the job done.
And if you were in the last session, you may have heard from Stephen, because not only does he run a construction company and serve as vice president of the Historical Society, but he's also one of 4 people who's restoring the 1830s Ham House on a seasonal road in Jackson, an original untouched cape with no heating or plumbing and vacant for 60 years. So I don't know when you run the construction company, actually. He does beautiful work. So our 7 lessons from 7 to Save, and there's so much that these people could tell us about what it's like to be named 7 to Save. But we decided we would talk about 7 things, because it's 7 to Save, and 1 or 2 people for each of these topics will come forward and tell you a little bit more about their project and how it relates to the theme of that item. So the first is communicate nonstop for fundraising and eventual fundraising success. Keep it local, thank and recognize donors and supporters, calculate the return on investment, and avoid controversy and negativity. And Andrew Cushing will talk to us about those things.
Oh, I am going to go first. All right, Leslie, you're taking over after me. I'll do it quick. Should we start with the next slide just to set the stage? Oh, no, wait, that's not the. Where's the angry collage of letters? Yeah, there it is. Let's start here. So I'm in a tough town. It's fairly poor. It's rural. There's a big libertarian presence there, and so there's a lot of mistrust about government. There's a lot of mistrust about people with money or projects that might take like the elite to do. So when we started this, really, the building was already politically charged, right? I mean, it was a billboard for libertarian beliefs, like don't do jury duty and like F the government, and then it burned, and it was there for 3 years, and everyone in town was really angry about how ugly it was. And then a nonprofit came, and we thought we were the white knight on the white or the knight on the white horse. And then the town was really just angry that we sought property tax exemption on it. They didn't care that we were going to put $1 million into it. So we dealt with a lot of hate from the get-go, which is kind of funny. I grew up in this town, it's my hometown, and these were like neighbors of mine and people who were at my parents' wedding, and it was, that was kind of tough. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage that we had a lot of communication and goodwill to build from the get-go. And so if we go back to the first, so we said, well, you know what, let's start here. We found a tree rigger in town, and he managed with his volunteer time to put a temporary metal roof on the building. And we're like, great, that shows that we've managed to do more than the tarps did for the first 3 years. And then we had all of these windows that were either burned and cracked and busted or just were not existing at all. And we have a fairly young and creative board, and 2 of them are quilters, and they said, well, why don't we just cover all the windows with quilt boards, and then we can even auction them off or sell them as a fundraiser. So for the first year, we were able to get a bunch of people in town to paint all of these designs on plywood, and we covered all the windows, and for 2 years, it was a really bold visual statement that this building is being cared for, it's being loved, and it raised us $10,000 just through selling the plywood, which for us, we had a hard time paying like the $100 or whatever it was for the IRS filing fees, and then we had to, so raising $10,000 felt like a huge milestone, and then, you know, we've raised that bar to like $1 million. So we are communicating again. It was all the time. We were at all the Old Home Day events. We're a regional organization, so we have 5 towns, and we knew that all the money wasn't going to come from Grafton alone. So we went to all the Old Home Day events. We went to all the local craft fairs. We went to the Lions Club, every organization that existed in our area, just to start sharing our news, building our newsletter base, putting scraps of information in like the town. Our town clerk does a newsletter that goes out to people in town. So we tried really hard to nip all that negative energy in the bud. And to that extent too, we have a Facebook page. I kind of hate social media. We don't have any of our big donors following us on Facebook, and it's like where all the trolls live. So we've been really good to focus all of our energy on our newsletter and the media that we can control, and focus less on kind of the wild world of social media. We haven't wasted our time with it. I think that's probably good for now. I want to get to Leslie and Stephen's points about communication.
Well, I'll go here. I guess I'm going to talk about friend-raising and community involvement. I mentioned the building we're trying to move and restore and put over $1 million in, we don't even own. So once the board decided to take this step, and it had not been in our long-range plan, we had to go to the town and ask their permission. And they gave it right away, as long as we raised the money. So from the very beginning, the Jackson Historical Society is a small organization, volunteer-run, and a very small town. And I knew we had to expand our donor base. I would say the majority of people in Jackson probably hadn't been to one of our programs, maybe hadn't even been in the building and had no involvement with the society. So we just had to spread our wings. And also, since the town owns the building, we felt they should have a little skin in the game. So we put together a warrant article asking for $100,000. 2 out of the 3 selectmen were against it. And not because they were against the project, but they were also wanted to pass a multi-million-dollar bond to build a new fire station. So, and also the community really didn't know what we were up to. So we decided to hold a community event, but in our center, the Whitney Center, but the problem was, how do we get people to come? So besides being a historical society, we also feature 19th century White Mountain art and have a very impressive collection of early art. The Jackson Grammar School is across the street. We had the kids come over to the society, pick out a painting, paint their interpretation of it, and we had an art show. We also had them learn a song that we commissioned, the Society commissioned 25 years ago about Jackson for our bicentennial. So we had the kids learn the song. We packed the house at our meeting. Every one of those kids up on the stage probably brought parents, neighbors, friends, and after they wowed the hall with their song and a very loud standing ovation, we gave our spiel. So when it came to the town meeting, and this was shortly before it, 2 of the selectmen spoke against the article, 1 spoke for it. We passed it overwhelmingly. So spreading our wings really helped us. So I think one of the lessons is think out of the box, use gimmicks to spread your message to a wider audience. We're also lucky to have a local paper that's published 3 days a week, and on Saturdays they have a multi-page feature on a single subject. And we were lucky to have them do 2 long features on us, once when we were just getting started, explaining what we were going to do, and then another after the actual move event. And during the whole process, I would send press releases with photos. So the result of all that, getting this free publicity, was a lot of our donations came from well beyond Jackson, but throughout Mount Washington Valley. So I guess another lesson is get as much publicity as you can, especially when it's free. I think our fundraising costs have been considerably less than 1% to raise considerably over $1 million in a year. So get as much publicity as you can, especially when it's free. We also have something called Jackson E-News, which goes out to 1,000 people, and it's available to Jackson-based boards and committees and nonprofits. So I would periodically send updates of what we were doing just to keep people aware of what we were doing, and I would end each one, usually something had come up that had caused a big increase in our budget. So I would always end with a solicitation of funds. So I think that lesson is keep your donors aware of what you're doing, along the way. Mount Washington Valley has a career day in all the schools, and the local Jackson Grammar School used our project as their career day. So we had some of our contractors go talk to the kids, and then afterwards, the kids made a site visit, and they were adorable. For some reason, they all had yellow hard hats that they'd gotten, I don't know where. And they talked to us, they were so cute. But that was a wonderful photograph for another press release. So that lesson is kids don't donate, but their parents do. And they're so cute for publicity. So don't forget the kids. And we're very lucky in that we had some really hugely generous donors early on, but we also had hundreds of other donors. There were local citizens, second homeowners, friends from throughout Mount Washington Valley with, aren't Jackson-based, and many people from away whose interest is in White Mountain art. So I guess the overall lesson is expand your donor base every way you can, well beyond your own organization.
Thank you. Lesson number 2, build strong relationships. Find the right leadership team, contractors and partners, and nurture those relationships. And I think we have Scott coming up next. And this is Friends of Big Nansen.
Yes, this is a very, very appropriate slide collection here. As I said, the Nansen ski jump was abandoned in 1985, got completely overgrown, which isn't there, but you couldn't even see it from the road, and it's 181 feet high. So starting in probably 2014 is when the Friends group was formed. Now, I'm from Berlin, and that's where the jump is, Milan, and I grew up with it. My grandfather actually was the main guy that got it built. It was a New Deal project. And so there was a family legacy there, but I didn't really get involved. I mean, I went to all the carnivals and was proud of it and everything else, but I didn't even jump, you know, I didn't do anything, really. And then I'd drive by the jump and I would be heartbroken, you know? I wasn't willing to do anything about it, but I was heartbroken. And I would go home, and now I live outside of Concord, but I heard that the Friends group had started up there, and they were going to try to preserve it, and I felt really good about that. And then I heard about. This is Ben Wilson was a huge part of this. He got the project started. He got somehow we got some money. You know, the state of New Hampshire has no money. Somehow we got some money to clear the site. And on the left there, you'll see the redecking of the jump. And how that happened was Sarah Hendrickson, who is a former World Cup champion ski jumper, had family that lived in Plymouth. And she had heard about the jump, and she said, hey, you know, she said, I'd like to see it. She came up, and somehow, you know, it was in huge disrepair. You don't see that either. But she walked up, it was dangerous, and she said, I want to go off this thing. So she was sponsored by Red Bull. Red Bull paid to have the decking done. It was decked, and she went off. It was kind of a cloak and dagger thing. Red Bull didn't want people to know about it because they didn't want the liability, but people found out about it. I found out about it, and I was there, and I made a promise then that I would be involved in this, and so she flew off March 4th, 2017, and up to that point it was purely preservation. You know, that's all that could be done. And someone asked Ben at the gathering after, well, hey, do you think this, you know, would you guys allow the jump to be restored, to be used again? He said, never say never. And we took that, never say never, and we've been doing it ever since. We have so my thing is about build strong relationships. Well, the strong relationships were Ben Wilson, the state of New Hampshire, Red Bull, Sarah Hendrickson, that small group of friends that I joined that are now a much bigger group of friends. We reach out politically. You know, it gained momentum. Oh boy, geez, everybody liked to see her go off, you know, and then so we would promote that. But on a more personal level, that's really what all these projects are about. It's all about the relationships. It's not the structure. It's not the jump. It's all the history, the connection, the continuity. It's all the relationships. I mean, the relationships I've gained because of this project are mind-blowing, and it's because I was willing to step out of my comfort zone. And I'm willing to talk to people about the jump. I'm not so willing to talk to people about myself. It's easy to put my ego aside when I feel passionate about something like that, and I know all you people feel the same thing. I have a new group of new favorite people. You know, I've had a very close group of people, and it's just expanded. I would say the advice, any advice I would give, and I'm not qualified, but always talk to everybody. You never know. Always talk to everybody. Never pass up an opportunity to make someone else feel valued. I have been so pleasantly surprised, and just trying to be the best human being that I can and talk to somebody, the rewards come back. Sometimes financially, you know, with this project. So I think I can't really think of anything else except get out there, advocate for your project. Don't be afraid to reach out to your political partners. Even when they don't respond, keep plugging, keep talking about your project, use the local media, try to get statewide media. We've used all these tools. We don't really know what we're doing, but we've used all these tools, and you never know when that person that really values your project might contact you and be the difference. But in the meantime, just enjoy the journey and enjoy the relationships.
Thank you, Scott. Lesson number 3 is about fundraising, developing the expertise and enthusiasm to do your job well, and it takes a well-respected team of solicitors and spokespeople, good materials, prompt thank you notes, and accurate record keeping. Then do everything with fundraising success in mind. Andrew and James.
Well, let's see.
Yes, this is James first.
I have to say that the Flying Yankee Association's perspective on fundraising may again be non-standard. We were reconstituting an organization that had basically 3 boards that had tried and failed. And one of the reasons we decided we were willing to try preserving the train, and that there it is in service on a snowy day. I think that's actually outside the Bud factory in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, rather than any place where it actually carried passengers. But we looked around and looked at our own pockets, and we came upon we turned out to be a grouping of people who we thought had the money to build that building that I mentioned earlier. And of course, the world has changed and gotten enormously more expensive, and the value of the dollar has diminished sharply. And now we don't. But we have ownership of the train, and we have been through all the records, and we're going through the materials that came with this train from the state of New Hampshire to make sure exactly what we have. And we have maybe half the money necessary to build the building, but that's a good start. So that's my non-standard perspective on it. There was a lot of negativity, speaking to some of the earlier issues, there was a lot of negativity about the first 2 major failed attempts. People thought the direction was wrong, the goals unrealistic, and they were sad about the amount of money that had gone in this direction they didn't like. But now some of those people are now gone from among us, and we have attracted attention from a new round of people who see that we're actually making progress. So making progress and communicating about it are really important components of fundraising.
I would add, having sat through the fundraising session this morning, that talking to your donors before you finalize your plan is always a good idea, because something might resonate with them that you hadn't thought of, and then you've got a ready-made donor. So if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money.
I wanted to just share kind of our pie chart, because if anyone was at the major donors talk, this is inverted from the Chase farmhouse in Epping. And again, Grafton's a poor town. Even if we were to pull from people in Canaan and Enfield, it's not like the $1 million checks would have been coming. So we sat down and we said, okay, what's going to be the best use for this building? What does the community need? And how do we get there? And we had a general store that had just closed in town, and we knew that the town wanted it to be a taxable property. We knew that we wanted people in there as part of our mission to appreciate and experience an old building. So we chose to convert the meeting house into a general store on the first floor, which allowed us to tap into some economic development dollars that we normally wouldn't have had available to us if it were just a community space or even a library. So ours is very grant heavy, and this is good and bad. It's good in that it replaced those big donors that we just don't have. But boy, for an all-volunteer organization, managing grants we can complain about the world of philanthropy. It's kind of a messed up, I think it's kind of a messed up world in that the most underserved communities that need the grant funding the most have to jump through the most hoops to get access to that money. We have a $315,000 federal grant in this, which has been an experience. We have about $350,000 in LCHIP funds in this, various family foundations and local foundations. But you'll see that our individual giving and our volunteer labor is actually maybe, I don't know, 20% of the pie. We're working on that, having experienced the joys of grant management and dealing with this kind of insidious thing that happened, which is we matched two kind of reimbursement-based grants together, which meant that it was great to have the money on paper, but then when we needed the money to pay our carpenters, waiting 2 months for your check to come in is a real pressure point. So that forced us to go to some donors, which was good. We had no opportunity to be scared. We just had to go to those donors and say, we need $100,000 right now. What can we do to get that money? And that invited us to a whole new world of donor giving. A few other things about fundraising. It's constant. If you have a big project, we fell into this trap where we raised all the money in the beginning to start the project, and then the pandemic happened and inflation happened, and we weren't fundraising that entire time. So we found ourselves at a couple pinch points through our years where the cash flow was not in our favor, and we had to either pause projects or have some really stressful board meetings to manage the lack of cash.
One thing I'd add about the Flying Yankees situation, we were going to have to move it from the property in Lincoln, New Hampshire, one way or the other. The fact that we chose to move it 4 days after we took ownership, there was a little element of theater in that. It was still high summer, everybody was around, and off we went. Surprised a whole lot of people who dwell in the land of negativity.
Great, okay. Lesson number 4, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I think this is a quote from Andrew Cushing. Yes? Maybe? It may take multiple years to organize your efforts, get funding in place, and complete the work. Preservation takes patience and perseverance. When I was the field service representative, if I encountered somebody with a big project, I would say, you have to pace yourself. This could take 10 years or more. And people were always shocked. And I hate to say it, but I was usually right. So here to tell us about the Milford Bandstand project is Kate Coco.
Thank you. In some ways, I feel like maybe I'm not the one that should be giving this because some of these projects have actually taken longer than the bandstand. But I think we do have a good outline in the next couple of slides that will help everybody in the audience understand really the number of things that have to happen in order to pull something like this together. And keep in mind that this is a fairly small structure. It is not housing anybody. It doesn't have to meet certain codes. And yet it still took us 4.5, 5 years to get to completion. So I had put this timeline together for presentations to our donors, and you'll see Brian Gallion from Ironwood Restoration was actually the one who did our assessment, so that's him standing on the roof of the bandstand there to the left. But we started in the fall of 2021. We had gotten the message directed to the Heritage Commission that there needed to be some work done and what needed to happen. And so it took from then until March of 2022 for us to understand that we needed to have an assessment. Part of that understanding came from the Preservation Alliance and asking them, okay, well, what are the steps? How do we move forward with this? And so we were able to secure that $1,800. It's a small amount of money to have the bandstand assessed. Ironwood Restoration did an extremely thorough report for us. We were able to present that to the Board of Selectmen so they would understand what would be involved moving forward. In April of 2022, we received our 7 to Save designation, which also explains why I was a little bit off this fall when I went, wait, we're doing 7 to Save in the fall? We did ours in the spring, right? And then in October of 2022, it took until October of 2022 for us to get the full report back. The good news was the roof is in great shape. The bulk of the cost is in the woodworking, and so we knew we were going to have to find really specific skill sets. We also knew that the facilities people in town had struggled to find that skill set, and even in some of the people that they had found that had it, didn't necessarily want to engage in a municipal project. So we actually started fundraising for this in November of 2022. Once we had that report back, I should clarify, that report was not only an assessment of what was needed in terms of technical work, but provided us with a projected budget. And so we were then able to start the fundraising knowing that our target was about $90,000. Now keep in mind, costs go up over time, and we finished this project 3 years or 4 years after we got that estimate. So I think one of the mistakes that we made was that we had padded the budget a little bit so that we knew we had some contingency. It wasn't enough, and I'll explain why when we get to the next slide. We also partnered with our Historical Society on that fundraising, and because the town of Milford cannot accept donations electronically, we put together a memorandum of agreement with the Historical Society. They set up a PayPal account, they took electronic donations, and they periodically turned those over to the town of Milford. We had somebody from the Historical Society who actually wrote and thanked all of those donors, and we kept track of some of the larger donations, but most of them were fairly small. The sizable donations came in directly to the town. By January of 2023, we had raised about $30,000, and there were some members of the Heritage Commission and involved in town who felt that that was enough for us to move forward with a warrant article. And so that warrant article was actually on the ballot in March of 2023. I felt that was a little bit early. We hadn't done the education to the public about what was involved, why it was so expensive, and some of those trolls and negativity that you get on social media had sort of already been in the mix and questioning things, and it felt like, oh, this might be a little bit soon. We can go to the next one. It was too soon. That warrant article did fail. And so we realized we needed to just continue doing the fundraising piece. We also put in for a Moose Plate Grant Award. Thank you. And received that. And we were able eventually to raise about $93,000. So we felt we were safely in the budget range that we needed. One of the steps that we took that I think is really important to understand about why this takes so much time, we took that assessment, we then translated that assessment into an incredibly detailed scope of work. And I mean, we dictated what methods had to be used, what materials had to be used, made sure we had legal language in that scope of work that said that any deviation from those processes had to be cleared with the town. And I'll talk about that on the next piece that I'm doing, but that was really, really important to how we did things because it helped us keep it on track and make sure that it was moving forward appropriately. In 2024, we were able to get that scope of work out. Milford DPW managed that, and we hired Target New England Historical Restorations in the fall to begin the work. They opened up that bandstand beginning in, I think, January of this year, 2025, and we found another $43,565 worth of work that was above and beyond the original bid. Now, the original bid had come in significantly under budget, and so we knew we had some padding there, and we thought we were okay. We still had to raise another $30,000. So we went back to those donors and said, hey, look, this is what we found. You can see here, not only the assessment had identified that there might be issues with some of the joists. Every single joist had to come out. The floor joists, the rim joists, all of the rim joists had insect damage that had it completely hollowed out, the way that you see there. And so that also meant that we had to replace all of the decking and basically the benches as well. So that added a tremendous amount to the work that needed to be done. So all of that obviously took time for a very small structure, which is why we're saying it's a marathon, not a sprint. You're going to come up with these additional financial needs. You're going to come up with the unexpected. You need to have time for that. And it really helps to have that structured process in place that NHP educated us about in terms of understanding you need to have an assessment. You need to make sure you understand the methods involved. You need to make sure that all of the individuals involved are have the skill sets that you need in order to be able to deliver. Am I on the next one too, or is it?
Okay. Lesson number 5, and I think we're going to have to just speed it up a little bit here. Face challenges and be ready to adapt. Adjust your plans or reinvent the project to keep moving forward. And I think we just have one combined slide here, so if you want to use the mic over there, Scott and Stephen. Maybe Stephen, we haven't heard from him lately. Okay, great.
Hi, as you can see from that photo, the project started with the big flood that came into the full section of the basement and wiped out the furnace. It was obvious that we had to move the building in order to fix this problem. An aerial shot would show you that the first big challenge was the power running in front of the building. That section of power was feeding 75% of the town. A lot of times when you see buildings being moved, the power company will come in and lay down the lines on the road and you drive over it, easy peasy, next day it's back up, everybody's happy. Met with the power company, they said, no, we're not doing that. You need to come up with a way to permanently get that power and the other utilities out of the way before you can move that building. Well, how do we do that? You'll need to go underground, okay? We developed a plan going underground, across the road. Very expensive, Leslie, we need more money. She took care of that. Went back to the power company as we were getting closer to move the building. How are we doing on our plan? Well, it's changed a little bit. We can't go across the road underground. You need to go under the building. Under the building? Yeah. We need to move the building, but in order to move the building, the power is in the way. And you're saying we need to put the power under the building in order to move the building. Yeah. So that was a big challenge to figure out. Talk to my subcontractors. We broke the problem down into small pieces, and that's something in construction I've learned that you have to do. Break it down. Okay, what's the path? Who's doing what first? And just communicate, and that's what we did. And the permanent power was underneath that building and energized before that building moved. I tell people that and they can't understand it at all. How did you do that? Say that again? Even the building mover, Gary Sylvester, had been doing it for 50 years. He said, I've never heard of such a crazy thing, but we pulled it off. So that was our adaptation to a real big challenge there.
Yes, so the slide that has to do with the Big Nansen on the left is the Big Nansen, and as I've told you, that was the initial focus of the project. First, historic preservation, then to restore it to have jumpers go off it again and hold events, and you know how hard could that be? Well, as time went on, we had a structural assessment done before Sarah jumped, but it was only for a one-time jump. A more thorough investigation showed that all the renovations that we wanted to do on that extensive work had to be done, which was a lot more money. So here we are with a structure that we know is not going to be restored anytime soon, and we have a board meeting, and one of our old timers said, "Hey, there used to be a smaller jump right next to it," and he said, "How hard can that be to maybe put a jump there?" So we went in that direction. We knew we couldn't just leave this dormant forever and try to raise what'll probably be about $800,000 to $1 million to restore that jump. So to speed this story up, we managed to get a Northern Forest Center grant for $40,000 because we had a contractor come by and say, "Hey, how much do you think it would cost to like reprofile that landing hill?" Of course, it was all grown, and he said, "Oh, about $65,000." Okay, hey, we have a $40,000 grant. We're almost there. We put it out to bid. The base bid was $104,000, not including ledge. Ledge? Oh yeah, lots of ledge. So we were stuck. And so now we had to really step up our fundraising. And one of the things that happened, which was incredible, is I'm friends with one of the people with the Berlin Historical Society, and I got a call from him saying, "Hey, there's a guy down here that's been trying to get in touch with the Nansen ski jump. He wants to donate some money." I called him up, a big hockey guy. But we wound up getting like $25,000. Bottom line, we were able to do the project. That small jump there cost $220,000. First year, we had it all done. We blasted the ledge. We held an event there. People came up and said, "This is absolutely the best jump of its size." The next year, we put a deck in and an artificial in-run. Same group came up and said, "Wow, this is even better." You can't see this, but perpendicular to that is a 10-meter jump that we also built with volunteer labor. We just last year we held a ski jumping clinic for the local kids. All said and told, we had 4 practices, had about 50 kids. We've got another grant for ski jumping equipment. We have a youth program going. So that's a case of having a challenge, adapting to it, and what you wind up with is actually better than what you started with. Thank you.
Great stories, both of you. Thank you. Number 6, use your resources and connections. I think we've already heard some of that today, but reaching out to the Preservation Alliance and others to get the help you need is really important, especially when you're facing those challenges. And I think Kate's going to speak to that.
And I did speak to some of this earlier, but I think these 2 shots are actually really good examples. we relied on the Preservation Alliance whenever we would run into something on the structure that we had a question about. And so, for example, we did not foresee having to replace the floor. We came back with different options. The option that we chose was a Brazilian walnut. We did that for maintenance reasons. Clearly, it's not what would have been used originally. We retained the original pattern of the floor. But, those kinds of decisions were bounced off of NHPA and others. We did have someone like Mr. Weeder working sort of in the background who had expertise in this. And so I think it was also important that the town was willing to work with Heritage and with those that were involved in this project, understanding that they didn't have the expertise in historic preservation, and they were willing to have others come to the table to give them that advice as those decisions came up. And they were able to manage that contract so that they could make sure that those things happened. Similarly with the roof, that material is a specific type of alloy metal. Wasn't something that many people were familiar with. I think we initially thought that the contractor would probably outsource the treatment of that, but we were able to pull in, again, bouncing off of NHPA and other resources that we had with the expertise. Hey, are we doing the right thing here? Can we go ahead with what the contractor's plan is? Is this the right material? Since it's intact, it's a little less risky. Are we good? And we were able to do that. So it was really important to have those people in the background and also to have the strong relationship with the town, knowing that they would accept that input, and we came out ultimately with a much stronger product as a result.
Thank you. And I think it's worth noting that Kate was probably a wonderful partner for the town. These relationships work two ways, and I can see where you really had a strong relationship with your partners. Okay, celebrate the wins and keep it fun. I think this is Leslie.
One thing, Stephen and I have had a lot of sleepless nights, and one thing he didn't mention when he was talking about the power companies, there were 3 companies: telephone, internet, cable, do I have them all? And one of them had to hand splice over 2,000 wires, and our original guesstimate was maybe 30,000, and I think it cost us 95,000 just to move the bloody wires. So there was a lot of stress, but also we felt it was important to have a positive president, not just talk about our problems, but to provoke fun reactions in the town. In October in Jackson is month of pumpkin displays all over town. Hundreds of people come and walk through the village to look at all these displays. So just a year ago, October, Stephen put a tire on the building, attached ropes to it, and had pumpkin-headed kids and a pumpkin-headed bicycler pulling the building. And then we had a sign about what we were doing because we were just getting started on our capital campaign, and that was up for a month. And then just prior to our actual moving the building, we replicated that with the kids from the Jackson Grammar School. And they're just little kids. They, again, came with their yellow hard hats, attached ropes to the building, got them to pull the building. Great photo for a press release. So our project is just in the heart of the village. Every time you go to the post office or the school or drive through town, you could see our progress, which was very dramatic. Just incredible pieces of equipment. One thing Stephen didn't mention, a major challenge was we discovered under the building huge boulders that had been brought down by the glacier. So everybody was watching all this action, and we were constantly being asked, when is the building going to move? So we've decided to make an event of it. We published the move date. We had a band. We gave away popcorn. We printed shirts that we gave to all of our board and the crew moving the building and our larger donors, and we sold. It was a beautiful day. People arrived, hundreds of people showed up. Many brought lawn chairs. Most of them stayed 3 hours, which it actually took to get it to the final location. NHPR was there, New Hampshire Magazine was there, the Conway Sun did a 7-page event with lots of pictures, and many of our grand tours, several people from the Preservation Society were there, which we thank you, Maggie, and others. So I think the lesson from that is fun events get much better participation and press than boring ones. So try to keep it fun. And then our very last laugh came with a board member hung legs out of a hole in the foundation with ruby slippers. So, I mean, it looked like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz was crushed by the building. Literally, these legs were hanging out, which she stuffed with gourds. So I think that lesson is fun can also be made by just a single person with a cute idea. You don't have to make a huge, big production out of it, but keep it fun.
Thank you. And finally, Andrew Cushing is going to speak to a couple of those other pictures on this slide.
Yeah. We have a nice diverse board in terms of ages. We have board members. Our treasurer is 29, who just turned 30, and then we have some board members who are in their 80s. So we like to think of it. We have some young people who keep it fun and keep it entertaining, and then people who keep us out of trouble. And one of the jokes we made, we have a porta potty at the meeting house because it's a construction site and it's right on the rail trail, so it's very popular. And we made a sign that said, to make another deposit, visit our website. And I have to say, our oldest board member was mortified that we made this sign, but we checked our PayPal account and Governor John Lynch had made a $500 deposit in our account. So that, yeah. I'm going to steal that idea. Yeah, feel free to steal that idea. And then we also, I feel like a board, if you were a board of people who are all insurance adjusters, it would be the most boring board you could have because everyone would be risk averse. We have buildings that are, had a hole in the roof and had fire damage, and we said, we need to bring people in here because they need to experience both. We want them kind of along for the ride and feel like they're part of this movement. They're making it possible, but it made it kind of hard to do events and open houses. So once we had a floor down, we said we need to get as many people in here as possible, especially the donors. And so we would have these open houses and parties for our donors, and we would give them food and booze and tour them around. And they loved the idea that they could fall off one of the rafters in the attic. Like, there was an element of excitement for that. And then again, at our old home days, we would do window glazing demonstrations. Our board, mostly out of lack of money, but partial interest, we had, 100 windows to do between all of our properties. And so we would bring in all the volunteers, and we would do these big window glazing events with food and drink and music. Especially through the winter time, to keep us engaged. And that was a great way to build kind of a future board member pipeline, but also meet donors and have some events that made them, again, feel like they were part of this milestone. So it's sometimes hard to keep it fun when we have to deal with such trolls, but it's good to have a diversity of thought on your board so they can tell you to, don't dwell on that. Let's move on, keep it positive. So.
With unexpected dividends. Yes, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry James had to leave early to catch a plane, but to the rest of you, thank you for sharing all your hard work and your wonderful insights and stories. There's more where that came from. We're going to end now, but in 15 minutes, we'll start 20 minutes, we'll start the 7 to Save announcement for the class of 2025 right here. So, wait, there's a question. Okay. Oh, a 7 to Save for 2025? We'll applaud you shortly. Thank you very much for coming. And if you're interested in applying to 7 to Save, the nomination process opens after the first of the year, usually in the springtime.